Hello, I would like to redo in this format the gun psyker build. So 2 notes real quick. You can use the recon las gun instead. The las pistol also works, but it's not as good. Uncanny strike is a very bad blessing, and I'm going to give a dedicated video to it. But in this build in particular, Uncanny Strike is really bad. Uncanny Strike is basically a band-aid if your build isn't strong enough to just overpower crushers in its own right, which all meta builds are. That's why there is literally zero meta builds that make use of Uncanny Strike. If your favorite YouTuber's using it, they're just not playing a super min-max build. Okay, now, so the knife, because you're critting at like every single hit here with riposte, you can change riposte for precog, which ends up adding more damage than Uncanny Strike, by the way. Anyway, so because the knife gets a higher % damage increase than any other weapon in the game when you crit with it, this weapon wants to crit as much as possible. And it's the same exact thing. Riposte Flesh Tear Combat Blade is arguably the single best melee weapon in the game. You put it on just about every single like try-hard min-maxy build for a reason. And you're taking the carapace damage because with DD and Scryer's Gaze active, a critical headshot with carapace damage and those 2 talent tree abilities active will allow you to consistently 3-shot crushers if you aren't lucky with crits, 2-shot them if you have just, have the normal standardized luck with crits. So, the Columnus is still really fucking strong, especially if you're going to be critting every single shot with it. Flak is going to cover the most amount of things, and since this is a build all about damage, you might as well double down on it, though I will say on other classes, these are not the optimal blessings. So, for this build in particular, I really like running double toughness on psyker. I've tried it with one of each or multiple stamina, and it's just never worth it. Because if you're going to be using stamina regen and sprint efficiency, then you never really need more than +3 stamina. And because you have so many ways to rebuild toughness with this setup, having high toughness actually makes you kind of invincible, if I'm being honest. CDR is always the most important thing in every build ever. Being able to use your ultimate is the most impactful thing you could ever do in the game. So being able to use more ultimates is always better. Right, let's talk about this. Anyone, and I mean anyone, who goes Assail, Prescience, then this, does not know what they're talking about. There was this one guy on Reddit, and I was almost going to make a video calling this guy out in particular, where he said this is the gold standard for gun psyker. And he took Assail, the weapon swap, Prescience, and Scryer's Gaze. And I was like, holy shit, this build is bad. Let me explain this real quick. Psychonetics Aura. 5% cooldown anytime you or anyone kills an elite or specialist. This single node can double, in some runs, triple the amount of ultimates all 4 players get to use. Imagine if you're playing with 3 shout veterans and 1 psyker using Psychonetics Aura. Those shout veterans will be able to shout over 100 times each. Just each, because every time they get a kill, they're taking 6 seconds off the cooldown on top of your 5%, on top of this, the 12% from CDR, on top of this global 10% you're providing. So everyone in the game should have like 22% CDR. Then you just kill 1 pack of mobs, and this is like 40 to 50% CDR before you get into anything else. There is genuinely nothing more impactful to the team than this passive node in the entire game. This is arguably the strongest single passive in the entire game. Just bar none. This node single-handedly doubles, triples, in really lucky runs, quadruples the amount of ultimates that all 4 players get to use. They get to press F that many more times. This node, any psyker build that doesn't have this node is not a meta psyker build. Period. We have known this for over a year now. I am shocked that people on Reddit still try to push psyker builds that don't have this node. Talk to any psyker player that's like over level 2000 or does any kind of challenge run. Every single one will tell you this node is the single greatest part of the psyker's kit. Because this node is better than any aura in the entire game, and it effectively is just a second aura for the psyker. This is better than Survivalist was before it got nerfed, and the psyker gets to use this on top of another aura that does the same thing. Sorry, I just really had to get that off my fucking chest, because I cannot believe the misinformation surrounding psyker and this. Okay, anyway, so here's why you do the rest of what you do. This is just free damage and move speed. Or I'm sorry, this is just free move speed and constant toughness regen. Because you're getting 3-round burst crits, this means every time you click that, you're getting 15% toughness back. So think about that. This, just getting like a 20 crit streak with this is multiple max toughness restores, which you will be getting. Okay, so with the way Disrupt Destiny works now, since its one stack is removed and shit, I like to go perfectionism. I like to go perfectionism now instead of like lingering influence, because I personally just don't have an issue with managing stacks now that they have buffed this node. Warp Rider is also just free damage, so I guess there's not much to explain, because honestly, the build kind of just fucking plays itself. Also, you can swap Smite for Brain Rupture. It kind of depends. Smite will bail you out of bad situations. If you fuck up and you don't have Scryer's Gaze active, let's say you're in a situation where you can't use Scryer's Gaze, but there's a lot of enemies coming in, and you also don't have a lot of Peril. Then that is when you pull out Smite and start using it. If you're confident you're never going to be in that situation, which, overconfidence, slow and city is something gay-ass quote people have been saying for over a decade, Brain Rupture will give you more mileage. But, so, Scryer's Gaze. This gives you damage, critical chance, and finesse damage. Same with Disrupt Destiny. So, finesse damage gives you critical damage and weak spot damage. And yes, that will apply to both, assuming you hit a critical headshot, which I'm going to assume if you're caring to play sweaty min-max builds, you're getting 60-70% of all your hits as headshots. So these two nodes are giving you constant, seriously, you are getting genuinely quadruple damage when you have these fully charged and active, on top of a weapon that already has finesse damage rolled onto it, and just one of the highest DPS weapons in the game. This build is all damage. In my original video showcasing this in true solo Auric Maelstrom, I was in like a 3-veg. I had to fight 2 bosses back to back on top of a horde, and I only had one hallway with my back to the wall. And I still was able to get away with it. Because this build does that much damage that you can kill a pack of crushers, a horde of enemies, and 2 bosses in one hallway. That is a reasonable thing to do with this build. You are not here to support the team in any way other than killing things. And killing things is arguably the best way to keep people alive. A lot of newer players will gravitate towards the bubble because it's simpler to understand, but the better you get at the game, something that becomes painfully apparent, the faster things die, the less chances they have for people to fuck up their defensive gameplay and for them to take damage. That ends up being far better crowd control than Smite and far better damage negation than Bubble. Who gives a fuck if you place the bubble down if you're killing 5 elite gunners every second? Who gives a fuck if you can smite the Crusher pack when you can just kill the Crusher pack in 4 seconds? Who cares? No, actually, genuinely, who fucking cares? Why does any of this shit matter? It's because these things are really easy. And a lot of people, they don't wean themselves off of them. They try to just, like, make them entire playstyles, which just doesn't work. This is a free node. I just like spending it on extra toughness because so you get toughness every time you build Peril and every time you spend Peril. And you will be reducing Peril often. So right here, killing enemies marked, 20% chance. This will instantly quell your Peril, which will also proc this. You will be getting like, you'll be getting like 7% toughness back from that. And it's 20% chance. You will be killing marked targets every like second or two. So, this is constantly proccing. Scryer's Gaze is constantly building you Peril every second you're in it, which is constantly proccing warp expenditure. So you're basically constantly benefiting from this 33% damage. Every few seconds, you're going to be dumping Peril from that Provenance and from Battle Meditation. And every second, you're going to be building Peril because you're in Scryers. So, legitimately, you should also critical hits. So you should be getting like 2 to 3 critical hits every second at the bare minimum. You should be building about 10% Peril a second at the minimum. And you should be quelling about 10% Peril every second or two at the minimum. So when you have a high toughness amount with this, you should be generating throughout the course of the mission. You should unironically be having 70% of the mission where you're generating like 50 plus toughness a second. I'm not even kidding. Also, don't get confused by the name. It's not gun psyker because you're using the gun constantly. It's gun psyker because you're just playing psyker with a gun. Arguably, the knife is better than the fucking gun here. The combat blade with guaranteed crits and like triple damage crits with flesh tear, you arguably don't even need flesh tear. You want real spicy stuff? You want like a real spicy build? You can go mercy killer flesh terror, and now you're getting 60% weak spot. Now you're doing 5x damage almost on your weak spot criticals with the knife. The knife will literally one-shot everything like this. It is absolutely busted. And it's also really easy to roll for because the only thing you need is Flesh Terror. You can survive with Precog or Mercy Killer or Riposte. So getting a God Roll knife is something you can do in like 1 or 3 tries, like anywhere in that ballpark. Same with getting the auto gun because Fire Frenzy honestly kind of sucks. Like if you went with Hit and Run or even Strip Down, it doesn't have the same synergy that it does with the Veteran, but it's still not bad. Like, there is multiple things you can do. Getting God Roll, this is one of the cheapest builds to invest in, and is, like, arguably the strongest or one of the strongest builds in the game. After the Veteran Survivalist nerf, I will say, though, this is the kind of build where you have to embrace my kind of mentality, where the best way to... sometimes people really just don't know what's good for them, and sometimes the best way you can support the team is by, you know, making the team think you're screwing them over. Because if you're the best player, this build is a force multiplier. The better you as a player are, the stronger this build does. Let's say you do 200,000 damage in a mission. This build will make you do like 600,000 damage. But what happens when you're already doing like 600,000 to 700,000 damage every run? Well, this build allows you to throw out over 1.4 million. And that's about what I get with my runs with this, as you would see on stream. It's hard for me to go under 1 million damage, even in like a 20-25 minute run with this. But yeah, this build is more just about the philosophy of my teammates probably suck at the game. I'm probably better than them. This build is going to make me perform substantially better. So yeah, I might have to hog a good amount of the ammo, but like, consider this. A bullet spent from your columnus in this build ends up hitting for the ammo value of like 3 or 4 bullets from the rest of your team. That's how you have to think about it. Sure, there's going to be crybabies on Reddit that are like, that's so toxic, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, those are the same people who shouldn't be playing Auric Maelstrom in the first place. People who prioritize fun over winning are not the target demographic of the game mode. You know? It's just like, it's just so weird. People go in with the same mentality they would go into Malice, and then they wonder why they lose all the time. Then they go and complain about how bad their teammates are, not realizing it's them holding everyone else back.